Now we have a metric to measure this. Looking back at this slide, it was very easy to tell, okay, they both have 3. And they both have, or this one's even, this one's not even. Usually it's not that simple though. Usually the ecosystems might look very similar to each other on paper, and it's hard to distinguish, is this more even? This has more species but not that many, or is this more even? It has, 5 species and it has a lot of all of them. Which one of those is better? Well, fortunately, there is an index called the Simpson's Index of Diversity that can actually measure that for you. So D, which is the index of diversity, equals 1 minus, this is called sigma. Sigma means the sum, and I'll show you how this works in a little bit. The sum of little n over big N squared. So what are these numbers? So little n is the number of each species you have. I had 300 daisies. I had 350 buttercups. I had 400 dandelions. And big N is the total number of individuals. Well, if I added all those up together, I said that'd be like 1,050 or so. So big N is the total number of individuals you had in that ecosystem. Now, on a test, I would give you this equation. However, I will not tell you how to use it. I'm not going to remind you what's little n, what's big N, what does this sigma mean. When you solve this, and we'll practice this, so don't worry, when you solve this, you're going to get a value somewhere between a 0 to 1. So D is going to be somewhere from 0 to 1. 0 is not very diverse, meaning maybe evenness is low or the richness is low, so not very diverse. Whereas 1 is like super optimal diversity. Your species are very even amongst one another, so lots of diversity and many species at that. At 0.5, you're like halfway, like, yeah, it's not bad, but it's not great. Usually you use this to compare ecosystems. You calculate the index for forest 1 and forest 2, and you see, okay, which one is better? Which one do I need to spend my money at in order to improve? So let's do an example. I'm going to show you 2 forests, but we'll work on forest 1 first. So I've given you the equation as I would on the test. And here I have forest 1, and I was looking for 6 different species: the green birch, white pine, American elm, water oak, sugar maple, and the silver maple. First question I could ask you, what's the species richness? Remember, richness is number of species. So you may say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You may say 6. You'd be wrong. It's not 6. Because if you look at my data, I actually had no sugar maples. I had 0 there, so that doesn't count as a species in this ecosystem. So in this case, my species richness is 5. But that only tells me a little bit. The next thing I would want to do is calculate this index to figure out, okay, how even is it? Is it good? Is it bad? Can I compare it? So that's what we need to do next. So first thing we need to do, little n, again, is the number of each species. So little n at one point will be 23, it'll be 7, it'll be 63, etc. But we need to figure out what big N would be. So big N would be the sum of all of our individuals. I've already done this, and the sum is 127. Great. So now I have all the numbers I need to calculate this index of biodiversity. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to a new screen. So again, D equals 1 minus the sum of little n over big N. And this is squared. I apologize for the super bad handwriting. It is very hard to write on a mouse. So what does this equation look like? So it'd be D equals 1 minus the sum. So I'm not going to put the symbol in here anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and write out the sum of everything. So the sum of the first species, which was, we had 23, divided by our total. I'm going to square. We're going to add that to our second species. Our second species, we had 7 over 127 squared, plus our third species, which we had 63 over 127 squared, plus our fourth species, which we had 2 over 127 squared, plus our fifth species, which we had 32 divided by 127 squared. Now on a test, you will need to show your work. Obviously, you're not going to be able to show it like that because you'll be typing. The way your typing looks is up to you. I just want to see that you knew how to plug this into the calculation. As you can see, it's really not that hard. It's just monotonous. You're kind of writing the same thing over and over again. When you're doing these divisions, the number of decimal places you go to doesn't matter because I'm grading it kind of loosely. Like if you got a number around my number, then you're fine. Because depending on how you rounded, how you added them, you might be off a couple decimal places, which is okay. For me, because some of these numbers get small, I usually do 3 decimal places. So the first one ended up being 0.033 plus 0.003 plus 0.246 plus this one actually ended up becoming really, really small, so I just wrote plus 0 plus 0.063. So I'm going to summarize these terms. I'm going to keep the 1 minus 0.345. That's me adding all of these together. That is this term up here. So D equals 0.655. Now this number is close to 1, or at least it's closer to 1 than it is to 0, meaning it's fairly diverse. Now, it could be more diverse, but the way I would interpret this is I would say this community is more diverse than it's not. Now, in the future, maybe I will measure this forest again in a year to see if it's changed. Or maybe I have a neighboring forest and I want to compare the forests with each other. And that's actually what I'm going to have you guys do. So here I have forest 2. I went out, as a scientist and I measured, I was looking for these 6 species again, and I kept track of all the species I found. What I want you to do, you can do this in the weekly guide. You can write it in your notes, but I highly recommend practicing with this and then going to the bio cafe and talking with each other to figure out if you got the right answer. So what you should figure out for forest 2 is the richness and diversity. And I highly encourage you just to practice writing your diversity calculation in your weekly guide or in a text box on Blackboard, just so you get practice so that when the test comes, you're not like, how would I write this? I'm really not looking for anything fancy when you're writing it in text form. I, again, am just looking to see, did you know what to do? I don't want to see just an answer, 0.655. I don't want to see that. If I were to see that, you actually wouldn't get most of those points because I want to see that you knew what you were doing. Also, another reason for writing it out is, let's say you made a mistake, you moved a decimal place too far, and your final answer is wrong. Well, if you show me your work, you only get partial credit off because I'm like, oh, they made a mistake here, that's why they're wrong. Whereas if you just gave me an answer, 0.2, I'm like, that is nowhere close. And you would just get the whole problem wrong, even if it was one little mistake you made. So it's a really good habit to get into. So again, work through that problem, post it in the bio cafe just to make sure that you got it correct. The last type of diversity is ecosystem diversity. This is literally looking at different ecosystems around the world. And ecosystems exist mainly because of climate. When you're at the equator, it's really warm. You go a little bit further, you get more moisture. Go a little further, you get a lot drier, so thinking about deserts. Then you're starting to get cooler. Eventually you reach the poles. So climate is really affecting our ecosystems and the diversity of ecosystems. Those ecosystems dictate what species are there. A polar bear can't live in the desert. A cactus can't live in a tropical rainforest. So these ecosystems are actually really important for breeding, so to speak, species biodiversity. Now, in a hypothetical dream world, ecosystem diversity is what we would protect. We would conserve ecosystems. If we protect this forest, if we protect this desert, in essence, you protect all the species in that ecosystem. But ecosystems are large. People want to use those ecosystems. People want to chop down trees. People want to fill wetlands. And so although, yes, ideally we should protect ecosystem diversity before species diversity, before genetic diversity, it's also the hardest one to protect because they're literally large and they have a lot of resources that humans want to use. So again, biodiversity is looking at that variety of life at a genetics level, which can be incredibly important to survival. At the species level, which is what we focus on most at the conservation level, and we can measure that diversity in different ways through species richness, evenness, and the diversity index. And then finally, ideally, we would study and conserve at the ecosystem level. But due to various restraints in our human population, we usually don't see that.